Today we're going to talk about this ink, Montblanc Jonathan Swift, graciously donated by Appelboom Pennen, and you can win this ink at some point, so keep your eyes peeled on the side if you want to win it. This is a limited edition by Montblanc. It says seaweed green on the box. It's 35 milliliters. The box has Mr. Gulliver on it. Not sure how well you can see that, but it's Mr. Gulliver lying on the floor, and these are the ropes used to bind him, and they actually are in relief on the box. So it's for an ink, I think this is a pretty nice box. It has the Montblanc star, of course. That's actually a sort of reflective silver, so it's a pretty nice box. I love the bottle. Very simple, very nice. Montblanc, sorry, I said Montblanc without the K. I'm getting there. Jonathan Swift, 35 milliliters, a nice dark green with the star on there again. I found this to be a pleasant sort of green-black, black-green. That's a very dark green. Flows well, works well, does everything well. So I think this is enough of an introduction. I think you need to see the ink in action, and that's what we'll do next. I hope this was useful, and I'll see you later. Bye-bye. Okay, so here we go with Montblanc Jonathan Swift. Start with a bit of fine writing. The swift brown fox jumps over Jonathan, whoops, like a flow. Then we move on to medium. Followed by broad. So far I'm getting a dark green. Some would call this black green or green black. And then I think it's time for some passes. So we'll leave those to dry, I'll come back to those. As I said, a dark green, nice shading. Look at this italic, look at this broad. Gives you some really nice shading, I enjoy that. Let's have a look at some flex writing. I hope this is going to work, because as you saw... railroading again. This ink doesn't seem to be a huge fan of flex nibs for some reason. I'm just squeezing some extra ink into the feed. I have to go very slow here, so it's already railroading. There we go. And let's try to squeeze some line variation out of a medium. But before we do that, that's not entirely dry, but it will be dry very soon. Medium. Much less saturation here, but this is a steel nib that doesn't really flex. This broad nib though, super wet from itself. And italic. I think this should be dry now. Yes. Let's make a second pass. Come back later for a third pass. But for now, let's have a look at some fat writing. S for Swift. And of course, the moment you've all been waiting for, the Tardif test. I'll just close up the ink bottle. There we go. And as that is drying, I'll add some water in a second. Let me just put something out of the way here. There we go. While that's drying, I shall start working on the scorecard for the ink. Cleaning, well, this is a bit of a prognosis because I haven't really cleaned it yet, but it looks like it's not a particularly staining ink. Should you wonder, this is not Jonathan Swift, it's another ink. I would say it's probably good. I'll put down prob for probably after that, because I haven't cleaned any pens yet. Bleed through. Have to check that later. Color, well, that's a dark green, isn't it? And we have shading, which seems to be very good, I would say. Even in this medium nib you see some nice shading. Not a particularly flexy nib, so that bodes fairly well, I would say. This is pretty much dry. Let's do that third pass and then return to that in a second. Now before I go on with the scorecard, maybe we should do some stuff here. This is pretty much dry. This is dry. This was just some water. And then it's time for the eyedropper of death. And we'll see what happens there. Alright, let's finish up the scorecard as this stuff is drying. flow, well, it seems to be good. There was this minor issue with the flex nib, but in all the other pens it just flows fantastically. So I'm going to write down good. Drying time, I would say, is okay to good. Depends a little bit on the nib you're using. If well, God, bloody hell. This says good. Because in some of the nibs it dries very quickly. Of course, finer nibs will dry faster, but I've seen faster drying inks. But I've seen wetter inks too. So I would say this is a fairly nice mix of dryness in the way you would probably like it to be, I'm assuming. Waterproofness, well, we'll have to come back to that in a second. And then we have feathering, which we'll have to come back for too. Let's get rid of some excess water here. Well, it may not be the most waterproof of inks, but you can still read the writing, and this calligraphy with a lot of ink, very broad nibs, seems to be relatively unaffected, so that's nice. I would say waterproofness is good. Now we just have to check out feathering and bleed through, and for that we'll move on to some cheap copy of paper. For now, this is the amount of shading you would get in a very, very saturated wet nib and maybe a somewhat drier nib. It goes from a nice dark green, not really olive, I would say it's darker than that, to a very dark black green color. This reminds me a little bit of a Private Reserve Avocado. Okay, cheap copy of paper. Fine writing. Medium. Broad writing. You'll understand I'm trying to imitate Jonathan Swift's autograph. I think it gets better with every attempt. J for Jonathan. Swift. So, how are we doing? Well, this is dry, cheap paper. I don't really see any feathering in the regular writing. I just noticed I was sticking out my middle finger at you people. That was actually not the intention. Sorry. Then we have the J. That looks good. I don't see a lot of feathering. Maybe just a little bit right there. That was a lot of ink. It's still wet, by the way. This is not feathering. Here we do see some feathering. Some minor feathering near the extreme flex writing. That's a lot of ink. Yeah, but I have seen worse. So I'm not disappointed by the performance of this ink in any way. Okay, let's go back 1 second to this sheet of paper, and then let's have a look at bleed through. Well, for regular writing, doesn't seem very pronounced, maybe a little bit there, and that's actually fine writing, but that was a fairly bold cross dash. Regular writing seems to be okay. Some bleed through with the 6mm nib, some bleed through with the flex nib, but you know, on cheap copier paper that's to be expected. On Rhodia paper, I don't really see any bleed through. There is some shade through, but I'm not sure whether I would call that bleed through. I don't see those annoying little, you know, marks. So I've said that is shade through. I don't see any bleed through. I don't see any feathering here, not even with the Tardif test. I like the Tardif test. This really does something. I know it gives you a good idea of the amount of shading you get from very dark to lighter bits of the ink. I enjoy that. Okay. So bleed through seems to be okay. Feathering seems to be okay to good. Should probably say that this is okay to good too. And there you have it. Now, what about another ink? Can we find another ink that pops to mind when using Jonathan Swift? Well, I've just told you that I think Avocado, that's actually this ink, has some, whoops, sorry, that's actually this ink. Avocado has something has something similar with that, with the Swift ink. Something in common, that is the expression I was looking for. So here we have some flexi writing. Jonathan Swift. So Avocado is one ink. There is one other ink I want to show you that sort of came to my mind. Whoops, again this issue, there we go. Squeeze some ink into the feed. So this is Jonathan Swift, and then another Noodler's Flex pen. This is the Ahab. I hope this one will, yes, write straight away. Here we have, it wrote straight away. Gerbin vert, Empire, and that too is a black, green, green, black that you may find to somewhat resemble the Jonathan Swift. And you know what? That's pretty much all there's to it. So, I hope this was useful. Inkcyclopedia entry for Montblanc, Jonathan Swift. I hope you enjoyed this. As you know, you can win this ink at some point from FB Geek, so keep your eyes peeled if you're interested in that. And I'll see you later. Bye bye.